Cloudcast Media.
Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media. We are pleased to have in the studio with us today friends from Cal Coast Academy, Jan Dunning. She's the founder and director of the Academy. How you doing, Jan?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks for coming in. And my longtime friend, colleague, the room lights up with her ebullient personality. It's a new word today. I'll be using this at least for the rest of the day. And she's shaking her head right now. She can't see through the... Well, you can't see now. We're on YouTube. That's right. How you doing? Yes, right. You're looking for the camera? Right. Very, very good. It's here somewhere. Krishna Kabra, how are you?
I'm so good. So good to see you again, Drew. You're making me blush.
Well, listen, longtime community leader, former CEO, San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, a parent and a board member for Cal Coast Academy. And it's always great to see you. Joined by my co-host, Sophia Lee. She is an award-winning filmmaker, and she'll be an incoming freshman at UC Berkeley. She's just done a great job, as her colleague Madison Mays has, as co-hosting the show. How you doing there, Sophia?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I mean, she hit the ground running when I first got her as a co-host, and literally I can just walk away here and just we're in great hands with Sophia. Sophia, why don't you get us started?
So tell us a little bit about the mission of Cal Coast Academy.
Great. Our mission is to educate young people, but principally to ensure that kids are kind to one another. They are learning life skills that will serve them throughout their entire life, soft skills and career exploration, and additionally to help students that have neurodiverse profiles. Out-of-the-box kids, we basically serve those that are underserved in other schools. And that it is a very wide range of student, from those that have anxiety to those that, as I mentioned, that have neurodiverse learning profiles, to those that are just exhausted with the social drama on other campuses, and lastly to Olympiads in training. So we serve kids all over the world. We teach them at the time and window that they have available.
Yeah, Sophia.
Mm-hmm. And how do you shape your curriculum to account for the needs of all your individual students? It sounds like it would be very difficult. I know it certainly is in public schools.
Very good question. We teach on a 6-to-1 ratio. And so we're able to customize within a 6-to-1 ratio. We incorporate auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learning. Our students learn from textbooks, they learn online, they learn through projects, they learn through presentations. So we try to incorporate all different types of learning so that they can carry those into the work world later.
All right, 28 years you've been doing this. How many students are part of the Academy?
Well, we've been capped because we have been building a campus. And so we built tents during the COVID. So we wanted our kids to be in person. And they've been erected and stayed erected since 2020. We just took them down 2 weeks ago because our buildings are almost complete. We will always be a micro school because of all that we do for our students. So at a maximum, we will have 80 students.
Oh, is that right? Okay, 80 students. And so, Krishna, did both your kids go to school here?
No, just my youngest, Almost still there. He's an ingoing junior.
Okay, very good. So when you just found out about Jan and found out about this school, was it like, okay, my son's going here? Or was it like an instant decision?
It was an instant decision. You and I have talked about
Yes.
challenges in traditional education for quite a while now. And
Correct.
Cal Coast is, to me, the epitome of what school systems should look like. The micro school that brings communities together, the school that is the breakfast club of schools, that is the kind of little house on the prairie meets the future of education, where every child is seen and heard, not just as individual special beings, but also the ways in which they learn. It is such a phenomenal organization.
Well, I love the fact, I'm going back to my education background, Jan, so hopefully I won't put you to sleep on this, but when you started mentioning the 3 different learning styles, and we all learn different ways, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, and we know some are better than others, some do all 3 very, very well in this area. When your son started going to the school, did you see instant transformation, instant anything on their son, or not really?
Well, Orm is very dyslexic, and he has neural language processing challenges. And my goal as a parent was always to keep his confidence intact, right? Because if your confidence is not intact, I don't care how smart or how challenged you are, you're not learning. And I think the instant impact or influence that I saw in him was that he felt that he was understood, and the different ways in which he learns math or language was understood and accounted for. And there's no reason why that shouldn't be the case for all children, honestly.
Of course it should. We've known this since people were walking upright, for God's sake. We'll just take a little bit long to run this stuff. Sophia?
So you've mentioned that Cal Coast is a micro school. Can you make the case that all schools, not just classrooms, should be small?
They should be small. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that, it is a system, right? And dare I use the word at the risk of sounding blasphemous, it's a factory, right? We're like manufacturing children out through a system, not necessarily catering for who they are, what they need, how they learn, what makes them thrive. Most importantly, what sustains their creativity, their imagination, their sense of self. And that's one of the beauties of micro schools, is that kids can be individuals, as they should be. They have so much development that is happening. Like, why should it not be that way?
You're spot on this, Krishna, as you usually are on this. And Jan, you used a word here in your description of the academy that is near and dear to the heart of our new San Diego County superintendent, Dr. Cisneros. And she's the first, believe it or not, female superintendent for the County Office of Education after 70 years. How did that happen when it was so long? But whenever we meet with her, and she's involved with our Classroom of the Future Foundation organization, she's on our board, she uses the word every single time you talk to her, and that's called belonging. And, talk about how important that is to you, Jan, and the academy, to the parents and to the students.
Belonging is really the backbone of everything, because if a student doesn't feel that they have a place or an importance, then they really are without any direction whatsoever. So we build that in. I mean, everyone in a micro school, everyone is critically important. You are a vital member of that team. And we do that through a lot of teamwork, team building exercises. We have a great program that is purposely building soft skills in students, and that's team building, organization, time management, support of one another, encouraging one another. And we do really out-of-the-box things in those activities. An example would be we created an amazing race. Took all technology away from all of our students, handed them a Thomas Brothers guide, which they just could not even believe that they were expected to locate 10 different parks around the county using a Thomas Brothers guide. But once they got there, they had to determine amongst their peers who was going to do the cranial challenge and who was going to do the physical. And it was all, time management and organization and everything else that had to be incorporated into that. But those are the things, a sense of belonging. And we also encourage that through our service work. We're heavy in service work locally, and we travel internationally twice a year and do service work. Just got back from Brazil about a week ago.
So I'm going to put my friend and colleague on the spot. Sophia, you know what Thomas Brothers is?
Unfortunately, I do not.
Okay, so this is beautiful. And the reason why I say this, you can Google it and find out, because my daughter, who was a fourth grade teacher at Chaparral, I brought up Thomas Brothers, and she looked at me like, once again, Dad, you're speaking out of the 18th century, for God's sake. Brandon Joe, associate producer and a incoming senior at UCSD, is going, what are you talking about? So back in the day, before there was Google Maps and there was Waze and all that business, they had a thing called Thomas Brothers, and it had every city had one, and it was like probably 100 pages of every street in the county, and this time San Diego.
Wow.
So you'd go ahead, and it would take you almost as long trying to find the doggone street as it was to actually get to the place. And you had to go down, and unfortunately, if there was a new street that was built, it wasn't on the map. So that's how we got around. And of course, you saw a bunch of people driving around with the Thomas Brothers blocking their view of traffic. I'm sure it's cut down on traffic accidents by about 4 billion by not doing this. So, your assignment when you come back on is to give a treatise on Thomas Brothers, okay? And if you find one around, put it in the Smithsonian. It's something. I want to get back to chatting with Jan Dunning. She is the founder and director of CalCoast Academy, joined by my longtime friend and colleague, Krishna Kabra, a parent, and her son was at the school, and she's a board member as well. I'm Drew Schlosberg, listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show. We are the longest running community podcast in our 19th year, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union. You know, those folks, and you talked about service, Jan. Mission Fed for more than 6 decades has been doing great things in this community, from food insecurity to financial literacy to everything in between. So cool that the students' expectation is you're going to do some service. Talk about that.
Yes, we have an annual service requirement for our students, and they can fulfill that with different opportunities and activities that we actually arrange at the school. We try to make our service work very diverse, because we want our kids to kind of hone in on what part of service that lights them up. So we do some of our service work on with environmental agencies. We do some with animals, assisted living homes, food distribution, Lucky Duck, organizations like that. And then again, we also do service work internationally. So every fall, we have combined with Pepperdine University, and we go to Mission Nutuvu in Fiji. And part of what we do is about 4 days of round-the-clock surgeries, tertium and cataract surgeries, and usually restore sight to about 75 people every year that we're there. And but we also do other things while we're in Fiji. And then in the spring, we go to a different country every year. We've gone to Albania and put floors on basketball courts, and in Brazil we worked at a little Franciscan school for impoverished kids in Salvador Bahia, and we brought down thousands of dollars worth of books to set up a little library for them, and did a lot of agricultural work as well.
You know, we come back from break. I'm gonna chat with Krishna. Did your son do one of these trips too? Right?
He did. He did Fiji.
We're gonna hear all about that, and then I want to talk about, I love the fact you brought up the confidence, in your son for doing this. Well, that's what it's all about as a parent, as we all know. And then I know Sophia's got a whole boatload of questions to ask when we come back from break. And we always save some time, Jan, at the end of the interview. Krishna knows this. She's been a frequent guest on our show. What can we do to support your efforts? What can our listeners do? When we return with our friends from the CalCoast Academy, Jan Dunning, founder and director, joined by Krishna Kabra, parent and board member. I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media, listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union. We will be right back.
When you do your banking with Mission Fed, you get great rates on auto and home loans. That's good for you, but something good also happens for a lot of other people. We're not for profit, so we put money back into the community to help lots of great nonprofits to keep San Diego strong. So you're not just getting something good, you're doing something good. Come to Mission Fed. It's banking that's good for all.
Brand amplification is the DNA of Cloudcast Media, and our code is the powerful blending of sound, voice, and storytelling to lift local brands and their communities. Whether it is our Brandcast, Schoolcast, or Causecast platforms, the unifying ethos is all about this community, the one you call home. If you dare to dream and want to explore the brand amplification of Cloudcast, a national leader in local podcasting and other Winfluence strategies, please visit us at cloudcast.us.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media. You're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest running community podcast in our 19th year, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, 6 decades of doing great things in San Diego County. Honored to have in the studio with us today our friends from the Cal Coast Academy, Jan Dunning, founder and director, 28 years old, if I got the math going right on that. Jan's shaking her head saying, yes, you do. And I'm joined by Krishna Kabra, parent and board member for Cal Coast Academy. We were talking about earlier about some of the challenges your son had. And certainly this is a perfect spot for him at the Academy for some of the reasons you mentioned. But did he go on one of these trips?
He did. I actually went on the trip too. It was last year we went to Fiji. And as Jan referenced, we worked with an amazing organization out there. And the kids got to participate in cataract surgeries, and we painted a local community hall. We got into the local school classrooms. And I think it goes back to building social skills, emotional skills, but also a sense of civic responsibility, and recognizing that not all children live like you guys do, and we, no matter where we are in the world, we have a responsibility to look after and to support other people.
Well, we've said this many times before I turned it over to Sophia, that I've been doing this show for a long time, and the amount of people and some kids living in San Diego County that have never been to the beach or never been to the mountains or never been to a Padre game is eye-opening. We've got a huge number of people that are food insecure in San Diego County, like massive numbers. You guys all know this. And the fact that you guys never lose sight of that, that, every kid can learn. And if you don't believe that, you shouldn't be in education for that matter. And you set, certainly a roadmap for how that would work. Sophia?
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned in Fiji, the kids were able to participate in cataract surgery. I know that this is a very rare opportunity for kids to do anywhere. How are they able to develop the skills needed to be able to participate in sort of intense community service? And then also, what effect do you think that has on kids when they think about their potential careers?
I think the skills that they develop start in the school environment. And thankfully, Cal Coast Academy, it teaches them not just on the international trips, but even locally in our backyard, that they get involved in community service. So I think it's not that we have a cadence of twice a year. They're involved throughout the year. And so the seeds are planted fairly early on, as soon as they sort of, are part of the school community. In terms of how it helps them lifelong, I just think it's in every way, individually, socially, civically. I feel like the skills that they develop are not just hands-on skills or cognitive skills. They're social intelligence, how to empathize with others, emotional intelligence and such like.
Yeah, Sophia?
Speaking of those soft skills, a lot of them you mentioned are developed through your tight-knit community. Now, I know that there's already a huge cultural difference between private schools and public schools, but when I hear small class sizes, I think 20 kids, maybe 30, but this is 6 kids for one teacher. How does that affect the community, and what are the pros, cons of that?
I'm going to let Jan answer that question.
Well, one of the questions that parents often ask when they're interviewing the school is, how do students socialize when there's so few students? And my answer to that is actually they form deeper relationships because they are with each other all the time, supporting each other all the time, versus walking down halls with thousands of kids walking by you. So our students actually develop lifelong friendships. We see, and I'm blessed to be able to have coffee with alumni all the time for years and years and years. And we see that even when their friends are on college campuses on other ends of the spectrum, they find a way to meet up even when they're at different universities, et cetera. So I think, frankly, that our students develop richer, deeper friendships as a result.
I would add to that. The other thing I would say is that there is less choice. And because there is less choice, you make more of an effort. And so in a larger school environment, typically you'd find your tribe, right? People who think like you, look like you, behave, same social media as you. At CalCoast Academy, the diversity actually adds to the richness of the way in which kids engage with each other. So when we went to Fiji, there was a time where we had a pretty diverse group of kids, a small group of kids, but a diverse group of kids. And one afternoon, after they'd been in clinic, they all were playing around in the pool. And these are not kids who would typically, you wouldn't think that these kids would typically hang out with each other, but they did. And they played together and they just suspended all judgment. And, it wasn't about whether they were cool or not. It was just, we're kids and we're hanging out together. So there's an added dimension to that too.
I know before I turn it back over to Sophia, one of the things, and you can't be, not great at this with your longevity, 28 years, and having folks like Krishna involved. My background is communication, and it's all about communication. You can't read, you can't write, you can't communicate. Pretty much going to be behind the 8 ball on this. And Krishna is an amazing communicator, as you well know. Back on her background with brand marketing and, of course, running a nonprofit in this area. So before I turn it back over to Sophia, who's a great communicator, award-winning filmmaker, talk about how much you emphasize communication and especially the long-lost skill of listening.
Interesting that you would say that, because a number of years ago, I mentioned to you that we work with Pepperdine in Fiji. That came about because many of our students over the years like to go to private, smaller schools because they're used to a smaller environment. That's where their comfort level is. And I received a phone call from one of the chancellors of Pepperdine. This was now at least 16, 17 years ago. And she said, "Why do your students interview so well?" And I said, well, I'm glad that they do. And she said, "Do you go through a course with them? Because we sit in front of your students and they articulate beautifully. They're comfortable talking with adults." And I said, "Well, no, we don't really do any specific training whatsoever. But because we're small, they're interacting with adults and each other all the time, every day, every hour of every day. So they grow to become very comfortable with the situation." That actually opened our door to where she came around and said, "Well, my husband and I built a clinic in Fiji. We've never invited high school students, but would you like to come and serve?" And I said, "Of course." So we've been doing that for the last about 16 years.
Yeah, well, communication is the key, obviously, and the comments from the chancellor at Pepperdine, certainly a lot of this is what you guys do. It doesn't hurt that it's 6-1, but you also have these great experiences. Sophia?
Yeah, so with students, a lot of times graduating high school, going to university or out into the real world, it can be very overwhelming. There's so many people and you kind of feel like a small fish in a big pond. Do you think that CalCoast Academy prepares students for such a large environment coming out of such a small scale environment and interacting with these people so closely to all of a sudden there's a million people in one room and you don't know anybody?
That's a great question. I just mentioned that some of our students still want to go off to a small school. So they choose a USD or a Pepperdine or a smaller school. Mm-hmm. But many of our students go on to very large campuses, Michigan State and you name it, large Stanford, UCLA, USC. And they were quite prepared because part of what we do is we teach them advocacy skills as well. So they are very comfortable going up to somebody, an adult or a teacher or professor, and asking questions, etc. So we track our students, and they all feel very comfortable actually transitioning. But I think part of it is the maturity too. As you get older, you learn to navigate larger populations.
So can this thing be scaled? Obviously the schools and the public schools don't have the resources to do 6-1 and all that aspect of it. But
neither do I.
Yeah, right. But what happens is, the concepts are the same. Should be, you can still do this with 25 kids in a room. Okay. And we all know the burdens of all teachers, K-12, private, public, and all that business. But some of the stuff is just common sense. Heaven forbid we actually ask the kids what they're interested in, and actually find pathways for them to be successful in whatever that may be, filmmaking, neuroscience, whatever, give them those opportunities. Talk to me a little bit, Jan, about, and you can add to it, Krishna, I'm passionate about Classroom of the Future Foundation, which you've been involved in, which we appreciate, of helping those kids find pathways, helping those kids, decide where they may want to go. It may change in 15 times before they get out of school. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's something that we really formalized this past year. We've been doing career exploration and encouraging students in avenues and on trajectories that they have an interest in for the 25, 30 years I've had my school. But we formalized the program and we now call it RIASEC and Career Compass. So what our students do starting in 6th grade is they do take the RIASEC test, which is kind of an interest inventory, aptitude inventory test. We then have our students participate in kind of a lifestyle inventory to see how they see themselves living in 10 years, what type of housing do they want to be in, what type of car do they want to drive, do they want to eat out often or prepare food at home. And that has a point scale to it. So at the end of the inventory, they have a number of points. And we have calibrated those points to San Diego lifestyle. And so at the end, they'll say, okay, well, I need to maintain this type of lifestyle that I want. I am going to need to earn, $175,000 a year, or whatever it might be. And that gives them some perspective. And then they start looking into hundreds and hundreds of different careers that we have 2-minute videos on that fall within their Holland code or where their strengths lie. And from there, they draft questions of what they'd like to know about that career. They draft an email of introduction, an email of gratitude once they finish their interview. Then we have an evening. This past year we were at Biocom, and all the families come together with their friends and their coworkers and my board, and they sit down. They have a list of each of the students' interests. Student gets up, gives a presentation. Parents in the audience check out anybody that they know. And then we set them up and they start their interviewing process starting in about 8th grade. Yeah.
Do you folks use Journeys Map at all?
I have not used that yet, though I've heard of it.
We were going to get you introduced to Journeys Map. So I've been involved in that since 2014. They presented at the White House on Michelle Obama's reach higher. And it's perfect for your students. I'll start with you on this, Krishna. Pivot over to Jan. Any final comments?
No, I'm just so glad that we had the opportunity to be on the podcast. I feel like the school is one of those hidden gems in the community. I think that we now have capacity to increase our student population. So super excited about that. I think Jan is a magnanimous human. I don't think people like her exist much in the world, unfortunately, from the perspective of running small schools and scaling them, but also advocating for the need for progressive education. And I just hope that the school community grows and hopefully we are seen as a model of what schools should look like.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Jan, any final comments?
I'm trying to think of, you've covered so much, Krish. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that kind of comes to mind. I'd say one thing that I would like to share is that we really do hold students accountable. We believe that once we've taught them standards, that we keep those standards, we teach them boundaries, probably a little old school in some respects, but I think it serves them in the future. And another area that I think is important is all that we do to address student mental health, because we are experiencing a major crisis in this country. And sadly, it is human created. And so we are able to really reduce anxiety and get kids a confidence and a sense of belonging that we've talked to in our small community.
This is why I want the animal kingdom to run the world. Not that they don't have their own anxiety and all this. And of course, Sophia won, her film, was an award-winning film based on mental health, among other things as well. So she does this, as does her colleague Madison Mays. Jen, promise me this will not be the last time you'll be on the podcast, okay? And what I'd love to have you and Krishna come back on with students that have benefited and parents that have done this. So as Krishna knows, you got to say this once, you got to say it twice, you got to say it 4,000 times. So we want to keep this momentum going. Plan on coming on multiple times to continue this trajectory. Because this is the way people should be learning, have been learning, since the caves of Lascaux, for God's sake. I knew this art history class would come back and help me in this area. And why don't you shout out your website if you can, Jan?
Yes, it's calcoastacademy.com.
Very, very good. Thank you so much. Chris, you're a treasure. It's so good to see your smiling face in the studio. It's been a long time. I'll look forward to bringing some bread with you or some adult beverages, and maybe even better down the road. And please give a high five to that wonderful family of yours as well.
I will. Thank you, Drew.
Absolutely. And Sophia, another phenomenal job as co-host. And I'm just honored to have you and Madison next to me. This won't be the last time you'll be doing this, and you certainly add a lot to the podcast, and I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm Drew Schlosberg. You've been listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union. We have the longest running community podcast, 19 years and counting. Mission Fed, 6 decades of doing great things in our region, from food insecurity to financial literacy to art and everything in between. We hope you enjoyed the interview.
You've been listening to an episode of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego community. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
Cloudcast Media.